Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. We finally found a topic that brought people to the room. This is very exciting. I am going to call the October 23rd Select Board meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. We will accept the agenda as printed and go to announcements. Libby?
This meeting is being video and audio recorded. The 2025 Annual Town Meeting warrant is currently open for citizen warrant article submittals through November 18th. Warrant articles require the signatures of at least 10 registered voters in Nantucket. If people have questions about how to submit a citizen warrant article, we have a guide online. It's posted with the agenda, and we urge people to please read through that guide before you submit your warrant article. And lastly, there is no select board meeting next Wednesday, October 30th.
Any select board announcements or comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, I had a request that one of our citizens couldn't find a YouTube link for our meeting yesterday, strategic planning meeting. Said it wasn't on the agenda. Is that true?
There wasn't one. It was in person only, not hybrid.
Thank you.
Okay.
That answers that question.
Okay, great. Any other select board comments? Okay. Okay, next on the agenda is follow-up on public comment questions from prior select board meetings. There was a question, a repeat of a question on Surfside Crossing last week, and I would point everyone to the website where the question was answered. And now we'll open for public comment for items not on the agenda. And I just want to remind the audience, if there's cross conversations happening in the audience, it's very hard for us because we hear everything very clearly. It's very distracting. So I want to encourage people, if you need to talk to someone, please step out of the room. And Val, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you. I saw your update today, this afternoon actually, on the GE Vernova blades, and you're right, it is concerning, but the lack of information is not assuring. I feel the SEE is not doing its job. They are taking down damaged blades, but have not offered any actual information on the defect. We're being told by the media that which is our only source of information at the moment, that allegedly these blades were manufactured in Canada, but they're being shipped to France, and so there's no information on that mystery. No exact number on how many blades failed. Single digits was the GE spokesperson response. Vineyard Wind today stated that they'll soon be allowed to restart blade installation. So the BSEE did not stop all Vineyard Wind operations and has allowed 8 more turbines and nacelles to be installed since the blade failure in July. That certainly is not reassuring. The permitting for this project was reckless from the beginning, and the fact that the blade failure was not addressed at the initial permitting meetings and hearings is disturbing and incomprehensible. The damage is ongoing, has not been fully addressed. They did not inform the town when the incident occurred for days, and now we're going to believe GE, their subcontractor, that they did not rush and their analysis was thorough about the defect, and strengthening them is a good idea. Our town's own attorney, Greg Werkeiser from Cultural Heritage Partners, stated recently, statistically, we should expect more blade failures, yet we're being encouraged to stay in this agreement. Why is there no information being communicated to the public with respect to their findings? Has the town gotten any real information? If the BSEE is actually doing their jobs, everything should have been halted, not just the blade installation. We deserve accountability for this blade failure, and we also deserve the right to stand up for our island against future projects. This is the first of 4 with Vineyard Wind, covered by the Good Neighbor Agreement. which is allowed to go forward because we signed the agreement and it went through the permitting process. The co-signers, your co-signers at Mariah Mitchell today, announced they're backing out of this agreement. It is clear you can back out of this agreement. I'm encouraging the town to walk away from this agreement, join us, Act for Wales, as co-plaintiffs in our lawsuit. We need to stand up for our precious ocean, our marine life, and the island we cherish before it's too late. Thank you.
Thanks, Val. Bill?
Okay, thank you. Bill Greeter, President, Nantucket Conservation Association. On August 21st, during public comments, I noted MCA's concern about the need to relocate the intersection of Ames Ave and Nantucket Road. I asked this matter to be reviewed and added to a future agenda. To date, I haven't seen any response. On April 9th, 2001 town meeting, Article 59 was adopted, dedicating 4 town-owned parcels on Ames Ave to be managed by Marine and Cultural Resource Department. The purpose of this action was to provide additional access to Hither Creek and Millie's Bridge, as well as for use as a possible need to relocate portions of the intersection. January 1st, 2017, 363 signatures were presented to the selectmen, requesting the town to develop a plan to provide access for property taxpayers and visitors to Smith Point. Subsequently, June 6, 2017, a letter was presented from area associations to the selectmen, noting ocean at that time was 47 feet from the intersection, and asked the town to stop preparing its relocation. Preservation of this intersection is essential. It provides public access to the Jackson Point boat ramp, the Smith Point Beach, as well as access for over 50 homeowners and emergency services. The town also owns the bridge, some roads, and accessory buildings on Smith Point. We could airlift the Zachem Bridge in to replace Nantucket Bridge, Millie's Bridge, but without the intersection, what's the point? In the current island-wide coastal resiliency plan, there are detailed plans for the Nantucket erosion management, the Ames Avenue Bridge protection, the Nantucket Road raising and bridge conversion near first and second culverts, as well as planning and implementation of the Baxter Road relocation. The Baxter Road relocation section includes acquisition of easements, maintenance agreements, finalization of road alignment, and the development of final designs for construction. The Nantucket plan does not call for any relocation of the intersection. It may be inferred that it needs to be done, but the Baxter Road type verbiage is missing. The sea barrage from the storms this year has altered the direction of sea loss. Erosion now is from a southerly direction rather than from the west. This change in direction has changed the scenario of how soon something needs to be done. The current version of the end house is now on raised cribbing to be moved. There may be ongoing work behind the scenes to address this issue, but the residents and property owners are not aware of any news, good, bad, or ugly. The often used phrase, time is of the essence, is certainly true on this topic, be it an increase in staffing resources, reprioritization of projects, or other possible tactics. The town needs to accelerate its course of action before it's too late. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Bill.
Oh, and I left Erica a copy of that original plan.
Okay,
Thank
terrific,
you.
thank you. Andy?
Madam Chair, thank you. Members of the board. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the board, thank you. I'm going to speak quickly on Vineyard Wind as well.
Andy, just state your name for the record, please.
Andy Lowell. I'll be speaking on behalf of the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board. We've had Vineyard Wind on our agenda for quite some time. A lot of discussion on it. I think we may be the only board that speaks about it publicly. And at our last meeting, we voted unanimously to request of you to allow us to choose one of our board members to be in on your meetings and discussions. I realize some of them, or maybe most of them, may be in an executive session. But if that's allowed, certainly that member would follow the rules of executive session. I think it would be wise for the board to hear what we have to say. We have a wonderful, diverse board that I am very proud of. We have 2 active fishermen on the board. We have a retired harbor master on the board. We have a couple gentlemen who have also worked in law, reviewing contracts. And so we're concerned about mitigation. And honestly, we don't see how mitigation for any more damaged blades can really be taken care of. We realize that we can't stop this project, but what we would like is a voice that can speak in any manner. And I think the Good Neighbor Agreement, as far as I understand it, does not allow that to happen. Nantucket can have a large voice. Nantucket's voice can echo up and down the East Coast. And I believe the rest of the East Coast is waiting to hear from Nantucket. We, as the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board, are prepared to support you. And we're charged with the care and environment of our harbors and surrounding waters. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Megan?
This on? Yes, it's on? Oh, okay, great, thanks. Are you good? Sure. Megan Perry for the record. I know you guys want to limit public comments, so I'll try to be super quick on this one. I just wanted to point out and possibly caution the select board to not insert themselves as the ZBA or possibly overstep your bounds, potentially intimidate employees with regards to reviewing the Surfside Crossing project, as the select board has been very clear about your position on this project, and it might be a little awkward for department heads to maybe voice differently since the select board ultimately signs their contracts, so it might be a little uncomfortable for them. With that in mind, I've seen a trend lately in option agreements, MOUs, contracts, whatever you want to call them, maybe in the last year, where there is a clause, unconditional support. And I'm just wondering if we could also use that clause for unconditional support of our community in looking at these projects, and make sure that the community is coming first before signing option agreements, MOUs, contracts, whatever you want to call them. Because I think the Vineyard Wind one, for example, the Hunting Association, Surfside Crossing, SBPF, we've got a lot of them in front of you. So that was my public comment for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Anyone else wishing to speak in public comment? Meredith?
Meredith Lepre, I would just love an update on how we're going with negotiations for the PFML, because it's been, I don't know, a month, and it's been since May that we approved this, and it's now closing in on November. And I think that we owe it to the town employees to give them the equal leave that people get in the private sector. You're always talking about how you have a hard time keeping people, and I'm sure it's not all housing. If somebody has a baby and they work for the town, they get 12 weeks maybe paid, maybe. If you work in the private sector, you can take 20 weeks off and get paid. That's a big difference, especially when you have a lot of employees that are young and you want to attract young talent to move here and have homes and all of those things. So I would love an update on how that's going. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Anyone else? Christy?
Thank you. Christy Ferrantella. I just wanted to make sure that the community is aware that there's currently a housing lottery going on through the Richmond development, their Gooseberry Place. There's 12 units in this lottery, and they range from 80% to 110% to 120% of area median income. And those applications are available at the Athenaeum or Richmond's office. And there's information on the town website if you go to our website under housing. And we really encourage everyone to put their name in, and they're due by December 9th. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Anyone else? Okay, no hands up online. Okay, so I'm going to close public comment. We have 2 items of new business. Erica?
Thank you. So 2 items of new business, the first of which is at your October 9th meeting, you all approved a waiver of the noise bylaw for the sewer extension project on Nobodere Farm Road. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the dates had to be moved. The new dates are now November 4th through November 15th. Originally approved, it was October 28th through November 4th. So I'm just requesting that you approve the adjustment and those dates for the noise bylaw waiver.
Any questions from the board or a motion?
Motion to approve the extension?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. And then,
Thank you. The second announcement came from the town clerk today. You just need to approve and execute the warrant for the state election for 2024. It's a normal item of business, so.
questions or pleasure of the board?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Thanks, Erica.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is approval of minutes, warrants, and do you want to take minutes and warrants? Anyone have any questions on pending contracts, or we could take them all?
Sorry, and no minutes. Those
Oh,
are
right, no
tabled.
minutes. That's right. Thank you for the reminder. So just treasury warrants and pending contracts. If there aren't any questions, I take a motion for both.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Okay. All right, I guess on to the event of the evening. Joanna, do you want to introduce yourself? And Malcolm, do you want to make any introductions or anything?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, everyone on Nantucket knows about Lyme disease. We lead the country, at least in incidence of Lyme disease. If you go back several years, there was a survey done at the high school that indicated about 40% of Nantucketers at some time acquire Lyme disease. And the Board of Health, we certainly have been following various ways to deal with that. And this project from MIT came up about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's quite unique. It's quite exciting. But what I really like about this project is they've had community input. They've been on the island 4 or 5 times. They've talked to the Board of Health. We had a small steering committee at one point. They had public forums. So the people of Nantucket actually gave back to them, suggested ideas, and kind of helped them do the policy of what they were going to go forward. So this is really exciting. Whether it actually happens, whether we actually see it in Nantucket, who knows? But I would like to introduce Joanna.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Joanna. I'm a
Joanna,
researcher
just make sure that mic is right up close.
right next to my
Yep.
face.
It's awkward, but
lot.
must.
Okay. Tell me, you have to stop me if I just kind of, I'll try not to. I'm Joanna. I'm a researcher on the Mice Against Ticks project. I've spent my entire PhD working with an incredible team, many of whom are actually here tonight, to attempt to engineer your mice and make them immune to Lyme disease. It's a pleasure to be back. We haven't given an update in a couple of years, and it's really nice to be back with good news to report. So scientists don't typically give project updates in front of select boards, so I figured I'd start by explaining why we're here. Mice Against Ticks isn't your typical research project. If it's ever voted upon and mice are released onto Nantucket, it will impact everybody, even those people that didn't vote for it and don't have the opportunity to opt out. So Kevin, who created this project, decided from the very beginning that projects like Mice Against Ticks, projects that impact the shared environment, require a different kind of relationship between the people doing the science and the communities that may one day choose to use it. So while I'm absolutely here to give a project update, I'm also here to listen and, to the best of my ability, figure out what you guys care about, because we can actually align our research with your questions and your needs, and hopefully one day be able to provide you with a solution that benefits you the most and addresses your concerns to the best of our ability. Okay, so as a result, I've only been given 10 minutes to give this project update. I'm going to do the best I can to stick to that time frame and then maximize the number of questions you guys can ask. If anybody wants more information, you can find me afterwards. You can email me. I'm always available by email. What will we talk about? We'll talk about the role of white-footed mice in perpetuating Lyme disease in the environment, for anybody who's still curious about why we're so fixated on your mice. We'll talk about how engineered mice could impact Lyme disease on Nantucket. We'll talk about our research progress, both in terms of our efforts to engineer your white-footed mice and our new Lyme immune mouse model. And then finally, we'll talk about what's next for the project. And Kevin will say a little bit more too. So what do your mice have to do with Lyme disease? Well, everybody knows that deer ticks are responsible for giving people Lyme disease. They're called deer ticks because they're often found as adults on deer. The deer is their reproductive host. But the mice actually play a major role in maintaining Lyme disease in the environment. You definitely have secondary reservoirs. You have shrews that are capable of infecting your ticks with Lyme disease, but assuming a healthy and thriving mouse population, those mice are going to be out there infecting as many ticks as they can. And they do it over and over again because neither the ticks nor the mice are actually born with Lyme disease. They get Lyme disease by infecting each other and perpetuating that transmission cycle. The goal of Mice Against Ticks is to break this cycle. We're working to make mice that cannot become infected with Lyme disease in order to block the transmission of Lyme from mice to ticks and then reduce Lyme disease in the environment. There's actually some pretty good evidence that making mice immune to Lyme disease can actually reduce Lyme in the environment. Scientists have shown that vaccinating white-footed mice, wild white-footed mice, by hand in an open forest against Lyme disease was capable of reducing Lyme in both the mice and the ticks, despite secondary reservoirs and unvaccinated or insufficiently boosted mice running around. So vaccination is pretty cool. But we obviously can't do that at scale. It's not appropriate for an ecological intervention. We can't return to Nantucket every 6 months with 1,000 ecologists and attempt to trap and vaccinate all of your mice. But what we can do is we can take the best antibodies generated by that Lyme vaccine, and we can encode them into the mouse genome so that mice are born producing those antibodies and don't actually require a vaccine for lifelong protection against Lyme disease. Of course, to do this, we first had to figure out how to engineer your mice. In other words, we had to figure out how to get new DNA into embryos from white-footed mice and then integrate that DNA into their genomes. Eventually, our end goal is to integrate antibodies into their genomes, but at first we just wanted to get any DNA into their genomes. So one of the things that we've been working on is developing a protocol for engineering your mice and changing their DNA. Nothing about this research has been easy. Malcolm said that it's been 5 years, it's actually been 8. Our team includes one of the most celebrated mouse engineers on the planet, and yet for years, everything we tried failed. But we don't have time to talk about what didn't work. If you're curious, you can come find me. I'll tell you everything. Right now, we're going to talk about what actually enabled our research and our ability to engineer your mice. So to engineer mice, we need embryos from pregnant white-footed mice. But historically, making white-footed mice pregnant in the lab at precise times, which is what's needed for engineering mice, is shockingly difficult, despite the fact that your mice are really good at getting knocked up. After years of failed engineering attempts, we were willing to try just about anything. We use an approach that is fairly common in family planning, totally unusual for mice, and never before used with white-footed mice. We implanted tiny temperature sensors into the abdomens of female white-footed mice in order to track their core body temperature. And what we found was that their temperature actually increased when they were ovulating, much in the same way that women experience a slight body temperature change around the time of ovulation. Using those sensors, we were able to track when our mice had ovulated and then plan very precisely when they would ovulate next. So by tracking ovulation, we were able to mate mice when they were most likely to become pregnant, and suddenly we could generate pregnant animals and embryos more efficiently than literally any other lab had done with white-footed mice in the past. I failed to mention that the same sensors that were tracking mouse temperature were tracking their activity at the very same time. And one thing we were very surprised to learn is that their temperature was actually highly correlated with their activity. So when our mice were running hot because they were ovulating, they were also literally running around their cages, which is great because there are plenty of different ways to track mouse activity, much cheaper and less invasive ways than using sensors. We created this camera system in order to track their activity, detect ovulation, and generate pregnant animals and embryos for our experiments. And this camera system has allowed us to scale up our operations significantly. We now have hundreds of cameras in our animal facility at MIT, where I've been told that we're likely tracking ovulation in more animals at one time than any other lab. With embryos in hand, we could finally make progress on engineering them. So in this video, you guys get to see what a white-footed mouse embryo actually looks like. In order to engineer this embryo, you saw that you stick a needle into the pronucleus, and that needle inserts all the stuff that you need to start engineering the DNA inside of it. Using this approach, we were able to actually overcome a major bottleneck for the project and start engineering white-footed mice. We now have this paper out that describes our very long scientific journey. It details a protocol that any lab can use to start engineering white-footed mice, and there are plenty of reasons to do this beyond Lyme disease, and it showcases those first engineered mice. So while we've been trying to figure out how to engineer your white-footed mice, we've been simultaneously working to make Lyme-immune laboratory mice. We did our Lyme immunity experiments in laboratory mice, much like the mouse in that picture, because until recently, you now know we didn't have the ability to engineer white-footed mice, and we also wanted to study Lyme immunity in a well-characterized model organism where Lyme immunity has been studied many times before. This work has been ongoing for a very long time, practically since the beginning. And while we've made a lot of mice that we hoped would be Lyme immune, it's only very recently that we created mice that actually are. So here's a diagram of the new DNA that we have encoded in our new mouse strain. This new DNA consists of an antibody that's well known to protect against Lyme disease. It's called LA2. We made some important adjustments to this antibody. We truncated it, we fused it to something called albumin, and we encoded it in the mouse genome in the ROS26 locus, which is just a really great place to produce things. So now we have these mice with an antibody encoded in their genome. We bred the mice up for multiple generations. We tested a few members from each generation, and what you can see here is that antibody production doesn't wane over subsequent generations. So these mice are clearly heritable, and the genetics is very straightforward. If you have one copy of the antibody gene, you produce the same amount of antibody. If you inherit two copies, you produce double. Okay, great. So at this point, we knew we had mice that produced antibody. Of course, we didn't know if they were actually protected from Lyme disease. And this is where Sam Telford comes in. He performs a series of tests in his lab in North Grafton in order to replicate the disease transmission cycle that we were talking about at the very beginning of my presentation to see whether or not those mice are actually capable of breaking it. So we sent a bunch of mice to Sam. We sent him the engineered mice, and we sent him some mice that don't produce the special antibody. Those are our wild type mice that are negative controls. And the first thing he does is he places infected ticks on the mice. And he places the infected ticks on all of the mice that we send him. And he waits some time, and then he checks their blood to see whether or not those mice have become infected because of those ticks. And then he takes those same mice and he places clean ticks on top of them, and waits some time and then checks to see if the clean ticks become infected. If the clean ticks that fed on our engineered mice do not become infected, then we know that we have indeed broken the disease transmission cycle, because Lyme disease has not passed from those infected ticks into our engineered animals and then back into those clean ticks. So this test seems relatively straightforward, but it's actually really hard for Sam to make sure every mouse gets the same treatment. And that's because Sam's working with 3 different animals simultaneously. He has mice that would absolutely love to eat all the ticks off their back. He has ticks that don't want to be eaten, so they're desperately trying to get away. And Sam actually has no idea at any given time if an individual mouse has Lyme disease. He has to rely on statistics. So we have to perform a whole bunch of these tests to make sure we have confidence in our results and overcome the inherent messiness. One other important thing to note is that Sam places way more infected ticks on our mice than any individual mouse would ever encounter at one time in the field. And he's likely working with a much more virulent strain of Lyme disease than you guys have on Nantucket. So we are performing very stringent tests, and it's arguable that the odds are stacked against our mice. We're now looking at the most important readout from Sam's tests. This graph shows the infection status of the clean ticks after they've fed on our mice. Every mouse is subjected to their challenge with exactly 10 ticks, and every dot on that graph represents the infection status of all the ticks that fed on an individual mouse. If a dot on the graph is at the 0 line, that means none of the ticks that fed on that mouse became infected. And what you can see here is that the vast majority of the ticks that fed on our engineered mice, and those are the SCFE albumin mice, they actually only have 1 antibody gene, so they're producing half as much antibody as they could be. The vast majority of the ticks that fed on these mice did not become infected. So it appears that we have indeed produced the first heritably Lyme immune laboratory mice capable of breaking the disease transmission cycle. As for what's next for the project, it's finally time to put all these pieces together. We can take the antibody that we now know protects laboratory mice from Lyme disease. We can combine that with the protocol, the engineering protocol we were talking about that allows us to engineer your white-footed mice, and we can finally make white-footed mice, and hopefully soon, that are immune to Lyme disease. Okay, you guys have been updated. Thank you for listening. I'm here with Kevin Esvelt, the evolutionary biologist who created Mice Against Ticks, and I'm also here with Sam Telford. He's an infectious disease expert who has studied the ticks and your mice on Nantucket and Lyme disease for a very long time. We are excited to answer everybody's questions. And I think Kevin's actually going to start, but unfortunately, we can only give socks to people that are here in person. I have a big bag of socks with me, and here's the size chart.
So Joe, the protocol here is that the questions come through the chair, just as the way we run
Okay.
meetings. So what I'm going to do is invite people who have questions to approach the mic on this side. And please state your name for the record. And since Erica has her hand up right away, while someone's making their way to the mic and she happens to have one in front of her, and clearly she wants those socks. So
I'm good with this. I'm good with the socks. But I do have 2 questions. One, who makes the decision to release the genetically altered mice on Nantucket? And 2, what are the impacts or effects of genetically altered mice to predators such as harrier hawks, which we create habitats for here on Nantucket?
just make sure you pull the mic up.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Esvelt. So as I see it, those are the kinds of questions that we are here to answer. The real purpose behind Mice Against Ticks was not just to make a dent in Lyme disease and prevent people from getting infected. It's also to serve as a model for how to develop technologies more wisely than we necessarily normally do, to invite community input earlier. And so the one thing I just wanted to add from what Joanna said is that the mice that she made in the laboratory have a laboratory mouse antibody. But one of the things we heard from the community of Nantucket is that a lot of folks here said, we don't want antibodies from other species in our white-footed mice. So what's going to go in the white-footed mice is in fact antibodies from vaccinated white-footed mice. And once we have those, the idea is that because all white-footed mice out there in the wild have antibodies, just like we have antibodies when we get infected with something, our immune systems respond by making antibodies. And when a white-footed mouse gets infected with Lyme disease, it will also develop antibodies against the Lyme bacterium. So the idea is to ensure that we are only putting something in all of the mice that is already there in some of the mice. But that is never enough. We also need to test what would the effects be on, for example, the predators, such as the harrier hawks, because we know that predators are often keystones in the ecosystem. You need to ensure that it's not doing anything to them. Now, as far as we can tell, it shouldn't do anything to them because it's just one more antibody in the soup of antibodies in each of these animals. But this is also why the mice would not be introduced on Nantucket in a trial. Right now, we're at the very beginning of the process of regulation. So the other unique thing about this project is that no one has previously engineered a wild animal with the intention of releasing it into the environment and having the new trait stay there for many years. That's never been done before, which means there's going to be a lot of regulatory scrutiny of it. And the first step of that is to run a field trial. Because if you are changing something that is very complex, like an ecosystem, where we don't necessarily know what all of the effects might be, we can feed mice to harrier hawks, we can feed mice to cats, we can observe the effects and make sure that nothing happens. But that's not the same as an ecosystem. So the thing to do is to start with the smallest possible change that you think you can make that can solve the problem, which is what this is after lots of feedback from the community. But then we also need to start small and see what the effects are in an area where it's reversible. So Sam has been studying small private islands off the coast that have very similar ecosystems. And one of these would be the site of the field trial. Once the federal regulatory agencies approve an initial field trial, then the mice would be introduced onto this island, and we would then see what happens to all of the different organisms on this island. But the other reason we're here is we want this to be a community-guided project throughout. That's why we came here before we did anything in the laboratory, and we want that to continue throughout the process. So if anyone in the community has something that you particularly want to be scrutinized carefully in this field trial, then you still probably have a couple of years, given the regulatory timing, but we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you because you live here and we don't live here, and that means that you have probably spotted something or might think of something that we haven't thought of. And so we want to hear it from you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else have any questions?
Good evening, Kevin. Good to see everyone again. I am Dr. Roberto Santamaria, the previous health director here. And I'm glad to see the progress that we've seen. So my question would be, you're continuing to do the work, you're continuing to do all the research. What if between now and the time of launch, or even at the time of field trial, what if a better treatment comes up? What if a newer technology comes out that renders this obsolete? What do you do?
Well, we don't do anything unless the community supports it. I would say if something better comes out, you should use that. And since there's Lyme disease out there now, you should take some socks and you should wear them when you go hiking.
Okay. So would the field trials cease, or would this be something to be also tested in for other people who do not have access to that better treatment?
Well, the other caution I would make to everyone is that neither this nor anything, not a new vaccine, not a new drug, nothing is a silver bullet. Nothing completely fixes the problem. In complex biology, it's always, you can make a difference, but it doesn't necessarily fix everything for everyone. So if there is a new vaccine and a lot of people decide to take it, great. If everyone wears permethrin-treated socks, great. If people want to cull the deer, that's obviously divisive, but that would make a difference as well. And it's really up to the community to decide which ones of these you want, and is it worth whatever the risks might be.
Thank you, Dr. Esvelt.
Andy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andy Ohl, Quick couple of questions. My first thought was the predators as well, and she added cats to the list, and I'd just like to add dogs to the list as well. A lot of dogs are being brought here that we're all adopting, and these hound dogs, at least the one I've adopted, really loves to hunt field mice. And we have a huge population of field mice here. And my curiosity has been right from the beginning of hearing of this project, of your releasing more mice here. And there's a lot of places for them to nest, and they love to get into outboard motors on boats and under the hoods of cars and chew on wires. And shall we expect a larger population? Thank you.
We have options. It depends on the release style.
Just need you at the mic.
So this is something that we have to study and something that we're actively talking about with Sam. He's been studying tracking your mouse population and their dynamics on the island for a very long time. So I'm fairly certain he has quite a good sense of how many mice you would anticipate in a given area, how many mice are on the island. And then as we start modeling our different release strategies, we have options. We've talked about in the past, potentially trapping mice, and then releasing at a point where the mouse population is the lowest so that we can flood the island with mice that are protected from Lyme disease. We could also release more mice than you actually have on island in order to have an even larger impact, more so than the other reservoirs. And I think it's something that we'll just be studying very closely moving forward. We know that the mouse is a very important reservoir, but our style of release will depend on studying the mouse dynamics. And it's a good question. It's my question too.
Virginia Andrews. So when I first heard about this project, having had Lyme disease twice, I thought, great, and what a cool idea. But mice are kind of the foundation of the food chain. So tinkering with the food chain makes me a little cautious about, for example, if you're testing on a so-called uninhabited island, how the mice would be contained. And mice just have an amazing ability to get places. I mean, because of, people with yachts love to land on uninhabited islands, and mice and rats and other rodents love to spread around the world. So that's one thing, and I'm glad that some tests are being done with the secondary consumers of mice. But I'm sitting here, I've just been going, well, if mice can get vaccinated, why can't I? There was a trial earlier which I participated in, and it seemed to work, and I would love to have a Lyme vaccine for me without having to, inherit one. But I have sort of the opposite concern from Andy, because at Marai Mitchell we monitor 70-some barn owl boxes, and we found a change in the mouse consumption of the barn owls. The barn owls at the west end of the island are doing okay. They're doing fine. Some of them are having bonus broods right now. They're sitting on eggs. But in the other end of the island, we're seeing a lot of boxes with activity, where there's a few pellets, or maybe there's some eggs that were abandoned, and we're also seeing a lot of houses with boxes of poison around the foundation. So in fact, one box, the barn owls were actually hunting apparently during the day. They were eating small birds, maybe as an attempt not to be poisoned. So there's I have some concern about that. So if would the genetic mice survive with with all of the compounds that put out a significant amount of poison. And the other thing is the change in the tick population. So when I was a kid, there were a lot of dog ticks around. I can remember just like a short walk getting so 30 ticks off the beagle, and then they were replaced by the blackleg tick. And now there really seem to be a ton of Lone Star ticks here, which I guess I don't know if they carry Lyme disease or not, but I know they carry some diseases, including the the meat allergy. And thanks Joanna for sending me that article. It was really interesting to read about the study they've done on the vineyard, where the ticks do coexist. But if we're engineering against one type of tick, and then that type of tick is not really around anymore, what's the point? Also, I was interested to learn that the mice really
Ginger?
groom themselves. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah, thanks. We do have limited time for this, so I just want to make sure everybody has an opportunity. Megan? Unless, Joe, there's something you want to... No. Okay, so we can't hear you without being at the mic. So what I heard was they're not prepared at this point to respond, but we'll follow up. Okay.
Just very briefly, I heard a number of things in there.
Yeah.
Do mice take the ferry? Do mice hop on yachts? Yes, absolutely. Part of the reason we're doing this is that we are planning on introducing mice that are resistant to Lyme, but otherwise don't have any other changes. And we don't think that Lyme disease has any impact on the mice, so being resistant shouldn't give them an advantage, which means that that trait is not expected to spread. In fact, normally when you tinker with something, when you selectively breed it, like our dogs, we don't expect them to be able to compete well with wolves. So over decades, I would expect this trait to go away on its own in the population. It would take decades, but we could potentially do better. I'm afraid you nerds typed me. We can engineer the mice in a way that make the genes able to vote. That is, the majority of genes in an area would have an advantage, and so they would become more common where they're already in the majority. And when they're in the minority, they would be at a disadvantage, and so it would go away. And that actually prevents invasion of that kind. But that would be a more complicated intervention. And again, you want to make the smallest possible change. That kind of change is not required for the islands because there isn't very much gene flow. Everything else I'm happy to address afterwards because I know we're short on time. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Megan?
Hi, Megan Perry. I was just curious, did you encounter any adverse effects on the, like, I don't know how you would determine that on a mouse,
I mean, I
but
imagine that the FDA, when they get more involved, are going to be asking many questions like that. But at this point, in the contained environment of our laboratory, our mice produce the same number of litters, the same size litters, and they do not pass away prematurely. If anything, I think they stick around longer. They're healthy.
thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Come around a long way here. So I'm Jim Gross, and I've had Lyme disease 4 times. This year I've been stung, or I've been bit by ticks 20 times. 1 year I was bit 53 times. I was in the generator business, crawling around the bushes all the time, and I dealt with it. But there's a whole lot easier solution to our problem of the ticks. And that is to cull the deer. The deer are invasive here. They were introduced here. They're not natural, like we are not natural either. But if we cut, there's way too many deer here right now. There's like 3,500 deer. They're eating stuff that, they're eating my fig tree. They never eat figs. They're eating stuff that they should not be eating. And if we cull them, reduce down the numbers, because they're the blood meal for the ticks, it seems like we don't have to think about it, we just have to do it. I mean, there are a lot of people that they like the deer, they're cute, they feed the deer, which is totally wrong. They're wild animals. You should leave them alone, and we should get down to a reasonable number. That's why people like to hunt down here, because there's so many deer. You're like guaranteed at least 4 or 5. So, and if you take these ticks and you make them resistant to Lyme disease, what about Babesia and Ehrlichia? That's still going to be in the tick, right? You're not taking that out, are you?
We're engineering the mice, not the ticks, but we could, I mean, the project is kind of a platform. So we could add new antibodies if there was a good antibody against, I don't know if Babesia has antibodies against it, but theoretically we could add any antibody to the system and make the animals resistant and impact that pathogen in the environment. And then beyond that, there are other opportunities, other reservoir pathogens that are containing reservoirs that we could work on, like Hanta and other viruses. But this is a solution that could be added to the mice. There would just have to be interest in it. And that's assuming that some immunologist has come up with an antibody that we could use to target it.
And one more thing is, if you do all this, and you introduce 1 million mice down here, which we don't need, we have plenty of mice, how long before it's actually going to take effect and keep me from getting Lyme disease again? Is it going to be 30 years by the time they're all doing their deal?
That is a great question, and it's a great question because the answer depends very much on how you introduce the mice. So right now, there's an awful lot of mice on Nantucket. There's going to be a lot fewer come February, March after the end of the starving season. Probably 5 times fewer then. So you could introduce double the existing population then, and there wouldn't be as many mice as there are today. And if you did that, then you'd probably have within mouse generation time is roughly 1.5 months, 2 months, meaning a few months later, you'd have probably 2/3 of the mice would be protected if you were to do that. So that would be quite quick. The ticks are a little bit longer, 2-year generation time, but roughly a year and some after the initial introduction of mice, you'd see a pretty major effect, assuming this works, of course, and we'll have more data after the field trials.
So
Okay.
you're going to like just sprinkle them around Nantucket all over the place? I mean, it's a big area.
Jim, I'm
For
gonna,
us.
I'm gonna take one more from Aisha, but thank you. And then we're gonna, Aisha?
Hi, thank you for this. Aisha Khan, I heard a question, and I think it was hinted at a few times. If Lyme is eradicated, or if one tick comes and another, is there a competition between the tick? Like, do we know what's happened since Lone Star has come here? Does that make our Lyme tick population go down, or do we just have more of them now? Just tons more ticks that have lots of different diseases? Or, yeah.
I think it's
Could you start
2023.
again at the mic? Sorry.
There is a paper on this topic. You don't think that Allison's paper speaks to that because it was too long ago? Allison's paper from 2020 to 2022 suggests that deer ticks and lone stars can live in harmony, and it doesn't necessarily impact the populations of the two. But Sam is shaking his head. He thinks that we don't know that yet and that we shouldn't make any claims. Okay, so we'll wait for Allison's next paper.
So it possibly could be in harmony, or I'm just wondering if one is eradicated, does that mean we have more Lone Star or more Babesia or more, more
If we
of one
remove
type?
Lyme disease? Sam, why don't you speak? I'm gonna stop.
You have to go to the mic.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Aisha. And that's going to be our last question, so we have a lot more business tonight.
So we have a hint as to what's going on Long Island. Long Island, the Lone Star ticks started appearing in the early 1990s. And within 10 years, they marched across Long Island to the North Fork and to Montauk. And they're colleagues of mine there who believe that Lyme disease is actually disappearing from Long Island because, one, the deer tick has become scarce, and we don't understand what the competitive nature of the interaction might be. But the other thing is that people are so worried about getting bitten by Lone Star ticks that they're not as active and not getting as many tick bites anymore. So it could be a human response to having a horrible, horrible pest in their backyards. Right now, Nantucket, for some reason, the Lone Star tick has not exploded. I started finding them here as early as the 1990s, one specimen every couple years. And it's odd because they lay twice as many eggs as deer ticks do. And you've got plenty of deer, which is their preferred host. So why they haven't taken off is beyond me. The places where you have lots of Lone Star ticks on Nantucket are on the west side, and particularly those towards Nantucket and Rampasture, and Tuckernuck is horribly infested. And so what's happening is that Nantucket's being seeded by deer swimming over from Tuckernuck over to Smith Point and Eel Point, and then spreading them from there. But field station, I mean, 3 years ago, I got 20 or so an hour. Last year, I got 4 or 5 an hour. This year, I got more Asian longhorn ticks than Lone Star ticks on the east side of Nantucket. So for some reason, they're not taking off, but they will rise in density. And the deer ticks themselves, it's very interesting to hear what Virginia had to say about the owl boxes, because I'm finding with my trapping that the mouse density on the east side of the island is about 2 times lower than what it is out towards Rampasture. There's something that's impacting the mouse population out on the Pulpus area. So I'm very happy to hear you say that. Because I was wondering, am I doing something wrong with my trapping? But no, so the interactions, you're absolutely right. Removing the deer tick as a major contributor to public health burden may be compensated for when, it's not if, but when the Lone Star ticks take over like they have on Martha's Vineyard. And we'll be dealing with a whole different set of problems with them. Fortunately, nothing like Lyme disease, but you should know that in other places, alpha-gal syndrome is now rivaling Lyme disease in terms of a public health burden. So you may have a new problem 10 years from now, and Lyme disease will be diminished. There'll be a Lyme disease vaccine approved by 2026. The Pfizer vaccine will undoubtedly be approved. It's identical to the one I worked on with SmithKline in the late 1990s. So this is actually a very exciting time for me. I've started working here in November of 1984. And I was so excited by this new idea that Kevin and Joanna had that I had to do everything I could to make that happen. But now we have lots of different options coming up in the pipeline that might reduce the public health burden of Lyme disease. And we have not forgotten about the other tick-transmitted infections transmitted by deer ticks. Fortunately, Lone Star ticks are not much of a vector. They're not transmitting infection as frequently as deer ticks are, but alpha-gal is real, and you're gonna start seeing more cases of it. Don't go to Tuckernuck.
Thanks. Okay, thanks, Sam. I want to say thank you to the team for coming, for updating us. Please keep us posted on your progress. And gosh, as I said to you before the meeting started, that I was sure your presentation was going to stir up in me a lot more questions. And science and progress. Thank you so much. Okay. Next up is Housing Office, Christy. Why don't we give it a minute for those who want to pop out now? I'm disappointed you aren't all staying. Okay, please make your way, please. We're still conducting business. Please take your conversations out to the hallway. Please make your way out. Yeah, Roberto, that includes you. Thank you. Okay, here we are. It's a regular Wednesday night now. Christy, go ahead.
Wish everybody stayed for housing. So Christy Ferrantella, the town's housing director. The request in your packet is for an execution of the regulatory agreement with Richmond's Meadows 2.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Okay.
So it's an execution of the regulatory agreement with Richmond's Meadows 2, Phase 5 and 6, which is their Gooseberry development. This is the last step in executing this agreement, would allow these units to be eligible to be included on the SHI list, all 55 units. And this has been reviewed by EOHLC, Town Council, and Richmond's Council. And this is a very standard process that you guys have reviewed with all applications to be on the SHI list.
Okay, questions from the board or a motion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Thanks, Christy, for all your work on this. Okay, next up, we have Tracy online to present the next item, which is a yard sale.
Tracy McDonald, real estate specialist. It's hard to follow up super mice, but I'm going to try with the yard sale.
Okay, Tracy, we just need you to speak up. It's not coming through very clearly.
Oh,
Sorry.
sure. Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. I'm just going to get closer to my computer. So I'm here to request the conveyance of a yard sale parcel that's part of an older RFP. This is a little bit different because it's not a paper road parcel. It is actual lots on a land court plan. It's also part of a larger scope that has been in the works for many years, involving several steps in order to clean up a portion of the layout of Ames Ave, and many sort of random parcels out there that the town owns, and some which required legislation and some land court attention. The Real Estate Assessment Committee reviewed the matter at their October 21st meeting and voted to recommend the conveyance for the original RFP bid price of $8,000. I did have a coastal resilience evaluation prepared by Leah, and the documents have been prepared and reviewed by Town Council and Buyer's Counsel Arthur Reed. So I'm here to request the board approve and execute the documents provided and convey lots 33 and 34 to Lori Meinke, the owner of 17 Ames.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, can you put the map up of, just so I can see? And I would love, is there someone here to speak about the coastal resiliency aspect of the report that they did do? Because I think when this was, I just want to make sure, when this was originally envisioned, it was what, 2008? And I think our understanding is very different than it was, and I just want to double check. I did see everything in our yeah. Which one's it? Just where are they, and what did just have someone give us the coastal resiliency rundown on them.
So I don't know what's happening, but on the Zoom webinar, it's showing something different.
That's weird. All right, let's try that again. Oh, screen two.
Yeah, and we had some of it.
I can't see over Matt's
Oh,
So Erica, actually, the better plan is maybe the 2024-7 plan, this one. So I don't, probably Leah's not here tonight, but Leah did the coastal assessment, and so this parcel in the middle is the one we're talking about here. It's a portion of this parcel. It's not in a flood zone. It does have some risk of erosion. But this is part of a three-phased plan to correct the layout of Ames Avenue and all these other residual parcels we have that have been stuck in land court, and some that were reserved for conservation purposes, but the road goes right through them, so we had to get legislation. So I hope to be in front of the board in the future for the second and third phases of executing this plan. So these ones in the middle are sort of residual. And the blue is ideally what we end up with. For, you know, and it's all wet over sort of, I think, is over in the Hither Creek area here.
Okay, so Matt?
Yeah, so,
The fact that it was reviewed by Leah, though she's not here to answer any questions,
right.
is that?
Yeah, I think that's all right. I just want to make sure that, because things are very different than they were in '08, and especially in Nantucket, I think, you know, our understanding of what's going to happen in a coastal region like that is much different than it was even 5 years ago. It's very dynamic.
I think the idea of this plan, Matt, is to address that. It's some ability to do some swapping so that we can address that effectively.
Right. And it may be a swap, maybe a swapping, but I want to make sure that we are not selling land at a decent or a low price, and then having to do takings later to move roads because it's been impacted. So I just think, you know, and I trust that we've looked at it, but I want to, you know, I'll vote for this tonight, but I want to make sure that we get a really, you know, and we have it in our packet, you know, an explanation of what zone it was in, et cetera. But I would like to make sure we're looking at the macro picture of, are we, you know, are we looking at the whole picture for the long term, not just for something because we promised to do it 15 years ago.
I understand.
Fair enough.
Arthur Reed's got his hand up.
Oh, Arthur?
You hear me?
Yes, just speak into your mic.
Yeah, thank you. Attorney Arthur Reed representing Laurie Meinke, the owner of the land immediately to the north of the three parcels that are shown on the plan with colored dots on them. Yes, that parcel. The previous owner of the Meinke property was awarded a bid on the three parcels that are noted, the two yellow ones and the blue one, some years ago. And that didn't proceed at the time because one of the parcels needed legislation because of an Article 97 issue. And the result has been that the legislation was passed, and and under Article 97 and the procedures under that, the blue parcel is not going to be included in the sale to my clients, even though it was in the original bid. It's going to be retained by the town as open space land. The taking of Ames Avenue is a part of the picture here, and you will note that Ames Avenue, as it is being laid out and taken, runs across a corner of the existing Meinke property, the triangular piece within Ames Avenue. Yes, exactly. That is being highlighted right now. And my clients will be releasing their interest, or in any event, signing off on any rights to compensation for the taking of that part of their land for the layout of Ames Avenue as part of this whole deal. Accordingly, I think that all of this is in the best interests of all parties. It's something, as I said, that's been in the works for a long time. And I think that with the blue parcel being retained as town land and with my clients cooperating with the taking of Ames Avenue, it's a win-win situation for all parties involved. And happy to answer any other questions that you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Arthur. Pleasure of the board.
What, just, I'm sorry.
Oh,
There's
there's.
another hand, and I've got
okay.
a question after.
Sorry.
Do you have any letter?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Deanne.
Thank you, Erica. Can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wondered if, I don't know if Mr. Greeter is still in the room, but I'm wondering if the Nantucket Area Association has reviewed this transaction.
Mr. Greeter indicated to me that he did not have any comments to make on this item.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, just one other thought. I'm just thinking, and it's not necessarily for tonight, but I'm thinking of the situation we find ourselves in Sheep's Pond, et cetera, where we're responsible to give things, we provide certain things, and then we're doing all sorts of other takings and everything else. I'm wondering if in areas like this, if we're going to be doing this, whether we should be doing, whether real estate should look at hold harmless agreements or something else, so that we are not later being forced by the homeowners that we are giving, selling pieces of land to. I know we don't own it 100%, but we're, doing something that's benefiting them. Is there a way we could get that back too during the negotiations? And so that's for, that's for future. But I just think, I think we have to really start thinking about it, because these areas are going to change substantially. And and the predicament we're in at Sheep's Pond has been difficult and time consuming. Is there anything we can be doing so that when we're in that situation here, we've taken a step in the right direction? Thank you.
Jeff Carlson's hand is up. Jeff, you can unmute yourself, yeah?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much. And I apologize. I'm having some connectivity issues, so I'm going to leave my video off, or else I'll sound like a robot for everybody. I just wanted to comment really quickly. I know Aaliyah's not here tonight, but kind of having gone over some of this reporting, typically in our coastal resiliency assessments, we're really applying and looking at not only things like our erosion projections, our flood risk modeling projections, other coastal flooding and hurricane inundation projections. And we're really looking at those for, what's going to be impacting that land as far as 2070. I know on this site, we've looked at it and it looks like, well, it is in an erosion risk zone for there. Obviously, Millie's Bridge is a little bit more paramount and critical in this situation. And it's showing it to be in that erosion zone in the next 100 years for coastal flooding. Our projections that we currently have available to us are showing that we should be okay until 2070 or beyond. So when we look at those, we're looking at it kind of in that lens to see what may still be available. Just using kind of that best information, if that's helpful. I'm happy to pass along any other specific questions to Leah as well, or I can certainly try to answer some, but I at least wanted to step through kind of the resources that we're using for those coastal resiliency reviews.
Thanks, Jeff.
Right, and Jeff, those were very helpful that were in the packet that we went through. That was all helpful, but it also really did get me thinking about, is there anything else that we should be doing now that's going to help us in 2060, 2070, and we aren't going to be, maybe the state will have changed its rules, but it's just something for future. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
I'll move approval.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Thanks, Tracy. Jeff?
Thank you.
Okay, town manager's report.
First up, we have a review of proposed sewer rate increases. And so the idea here is that the finance director will take us through the reasoning for the increases and what has been reviewed with respect to them and what the proposals are. It might be kind of a phased type of approach. However, there are some more immediate increases that are unfortunately going to be needed. So we wanted to give you an overview tonight and get a public hearing scheduled to actually have you hopefully adopt some increased rates in early December. Brian?
Thank you, Libby. Thank you, Madam Chair. So as noted in the AIS, we have been working with Hazen and Sawyer for a period of time on trying to really get a projection on sewer rates. But as we've looked at this first quarter, it's become apparent that we needed to do a rate increase for this fiscal year. So we're proposing to start a rate increase effective for January 1st. We are proposing to take the rate from May 1st to October 31st, which is the high season, from $8.80 per 100 cubic feet to $9.70 per 100 cubic feet. Then the what's known as the winter rate from $6.60 per 100 cubic feet beginning November 1st and running till the April 30th billing cycle to $7.30 per 100 cubic feet. We're proposing, currently the monthly charge is $33 per month. We're proposing moving that to $36. And subsequently also proposing raising the non-metered accounts from $248.33 per quarter for up to 3 bedrooms to $273.16 per quarter, and subsequently changing for 4 bedrooms and more larger from $414.13 to $455.54. As noted in the EIS, this will raise approximately just under $990,000, provided our usage continues in the same pattern as we're projecting. Sewer costs are increasing, and they're only going to continue to climb with the additional debt service, which will be coming on in future years. The state, through the SRF program, has actually permanently borrowed the loan pool with the sewer force main in it. So starting next year, we will be paying debt service back on the $27 million that we borrowed from the state revolving fund for that very important project. This is really, as the town manager noted, it's a first step. These have not been adjusted since 2019 with increased utilization, new houses, and additional changes in building. We've been fortunate that we really haven't had to. The goal is to get to a cycle where they're changed incrementally on a year-over-year basis. One of the things that we have been trying to do is to really take the rate structure from these two, from the single rate structure that we have, and tier it so that it becomes more affordable in all of the quartiles, which is one of the things when we had the administrative consent order that we were working on. It's a really long project to try to get to this point. I believe that we are fairly close in how we're doing it. One of the things that we've looked at doing is increasing the monthly fee, which ideally would cover the majority of the the static operating cost in the budget, and then the subsequent rate would actually cover more of the utilization outside the normal operating costs. We have been working with the water company to ensure that their billing software will handle this. The goal right now with Hazen and Sawyer and our work is to hopefully be back in May or April to present those changes with a subsequent hearing after town meeting to be able to make those changes for the next cycle, because they'll need to be calculated into the budget that we'll be drafting and presenting to annual town meeting. But at this point, we, rather than try to make large-scale wholesale changes, which will take a little while to really to explain to the public on how we're changing it, why we need to do it, we did need to make a rate change. So we proposed this interim measure for this 6 months while we finalize the proposal for the tiered structure. So tonight, we're asking for the support to have a public hearing to consider these changes.
Okay. Any questions from the board, or is there consensus? Do we need a vote to schedule a public hearing, or can we just do it by consensus?
We can just schedule it. It will be December 4th.
Okay. Everybody good?
Yeah, I think it's good to tier it. And I think the other point is, on a lot of these fees, if we could do a little bit every year, I think this is what, about 10%?
It is about 10%.
Over 6 years, if it was like 1%,
Yeah.
1.5% compounded, we probably would have probably 1% a year, we'd probably be where we want to be now already with a little bit money in the bank.
And the goal with the tiering is to be able to every year adjust and account for any of those operating changes so that it's more predictable. But I think we felt kind of at this point, getting to the tiering is the most critical step for this process so that it becomes affordable across all of it.
But my input is tier it, but then put a yearly small charge every year, and then we won't get
We won't be at this point.
It won't,
That's
it won't be
correct.
sticker shock 6 or 10 years. Like the sewer fee, everyone went crazy. But when the sewer fee was, cheaper, originally it was higher than it was when we changed it.
Right.
But it sat for 30 years and no one assumed should fee nothing forever. And so I think it's important just to go up a little bit every year.
We agree on that, so
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Brian.
thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, the next item is review of departmental comments for the Surfside Crossing 40B Zoning Board of Appeals remand hearing. So as you know, the board has been asked by the ZBA to resubmit comments on the revised Surfside Crossing proposal. So those comments are due, I believe, on or about November 14th. And some of you had asked to see, let me back up. Previously, when your initial comment letter was developed, comments were solicited from all of the town departments that were relevant to have input into the proposal. Those were gathered, you reviewed them, we all developed your comment letter. So that is the same process that is happening here. The departmental comments are in your packet. Some of you had expressed an interest to be able to ask the departments questions. So they are here. And you'll take those into consideration and finalize your comments most likely at your meeting on November 6th, so we can be sure to get them to the ZBA in time. There are a couple of other sets of comments outside of this that are also going to be submitted to the ZBA. Those include the Affordable Housing Trust comments and the Board of Health comments. And I think those are either finalized or being finalized.
Yes. We have a draft letter. We're going to discuss and vote on it tomorrow. Okay. So we should have the Board of Health comments to you Friday.
Okay, I may have already received, did Rocky leave? A draft.
I'm still here, Libby. I'm just online now.
Oh, thank you so much. I think you might have, did you send me the draft comments so far? I just can't remember.
Those are different than what Malcolm is talking about. I think what I sent you was I think some of the specific topics that were going to be discussed.
Okay. So you would see those for your finalized comment letter discussion on November 6th.
Okay. Does the board have any questions for staff on the comments that we've seen so far? I guess, anybody?
Well, I have a few, but I'll let other
No,
people talk.
no, go ahead.
I'm hogging the mic, I'm sorry. Number one was on page 98, Drew Patno was saying something about the sewer and the judge's decision, et cetera. But then later on, it seemed like it was sorted out when I read David Gray's. Would someone explain to us where that all stands with the sewer and what was done and what wasn't done?
Yeah. David's unmuting now.
I should be unmuted.
Yep.
The
we can hear you.
on the plans, Matt, that were submitted later on down the line, it specifically had called out a pump station, but on subsequent sets of plans, it says that if a gravity connection was not available, or if the gravity connection was the preferred mean and was available, that's the way that they would go. And as of now, the gravity system has been installed on South Shore Road as a dry system, less a pump station down at the facility itself.
And is the $1 million still stand to pay for the pump station? Was that?
That was part of the hack agreement, and I would have to refer that over to town council or George if that was still in the remand.
All right. So then I would just say that some of our comments could be that payment, and clarifying that there's not two options, there's only one now on that aspect. A second one was Mr. Willett talked about a moratorium on connections. Keep that in mind. I was wondering, what was that comment in reference to?
Matt, it's Mark here. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I just wanted people to understand that with our withdrawal permits set by the Commonwealth, we don't get an increase until 2026. Right now, we're pretty close to that permit. There is no moratorium. There is enough room in the permit for a development like this, but going forward, if there's many more like this, for 2026, we might get to that point, but we'll have to work something out with Mass DEP to increase that permit before 2026.
All right, that makes sense. So we have to keep that in mind going forward. I got you. Okay.
Yes.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Was there ever, and I'm sorry, the next one was there ever a electrical load outlined? Did Lauren ever get that? That was her request?
Lauren was unable to attend tonight
All right.
because she has a Builders Association meeting at the same time.
All right, well, so I saw in there that she was trying to find out what the electrical load from it was, and so she could comment. And then page 115, we were talking about, these previous ones were talking about traffic studies, and 116 was talking about ecological surveys. That was back in 2018. Have either of those been undertaken between then and now, and have we received those?
I'm not sure who would answer that, and also that the condition of the site has changed dramatically since then too. So that was my question.
Right.
Is up? Jeff's hand is up. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hello, everyone. Jeff Carlson, Natural Resources Director again. Those ecological surveys were originally in reference to the Mass Natural Heritage permitting process that they were working on as part of that site assessment. They did obtain those permits and obviously have done a pretty significant amount of work to the site since then. But those did meet the state requirements at the time.
So that ecological have been done. How about the archaeological? Were those surveys completed between 18 and now? And what is the result of that, if anything?
Oh, archaeological?
Archaeological.
Okay.
There was ecological, then there was archaeological, was page 116.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and see about Archeo, but that would have been done at the time.
Right.
There wouldn't have been a need to do it more, I don't think.
Right. Okay.
So we'll just confirm that.
Yeah,
before
some
we-
of this we can clean up if it's been done.
Yep.
And take it out. And then just a general comment, I know things have changed here, in 5 or 6 years. And I just want to make sure that we are, as a community, are addressing, anything that has changed. For example, traffic. I know it's a lot different on Surfside Road and in that area than it was even 5 or 6 years ago. And anyone that used it last summer will tell you that. So just in general, I want to make sure we're doing that. And the other, I want to make sure that, contrary to some opinions that out there, I would like us to be supporting the ZBA and be on the same side of this, as opposed to two separate councils and, us telling them what to do, et cetera. I don't believe we're telling them what to do. I believe what our job now is to make sure that, that all the department heads have done theirs and that we've looked at everything that's changed from then till now and that we are putting forth, a robust response, responsible response that on behalf of the town. And I hope that it is reflective of what of what the ZBA is going to do and that we're rowing the same direction. And so, that's what I hope happens, from this board as we go forward. So, thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Anybody else? Okay, this will be on a future agenda for final approval in 2 weeks.
So we're going to need to get a draft comment letter pretty quickly put together. So we most likely will put that together and have a draft for your November 6th meeting. So what is sounding to me like there's not anything other than what the departments have submitted. Check on those surveys that Matt mentioned, if there's any additional activity, and that would be the substance of your comments.
Yeah, and I think to Matt's point, just to reiterate, removing the stuff that's moot, so that we're not
Gotcha.
sending stuff that has been resolved or is no longer applicable because of what's happened in the intervening years. So.
Yeah, but I want to make, look, say, I'll pick on archaeological. I don't want to just assume we've done it. If we haven't done the test holes and done the checking, we don't want to be saying, oh, everything's done and it's great, and then find out that it wasn't done or that was, and then the whole thing is, sort of like what has happened in that area previously. We found burial sites, et cetera. So I just want to make sure that these things have done, so we aren't signing off on something as though it has. That's all. And that would be helpful, I think, for everybody.
I completely agree. Make sure that what needs to be done is still in, and what is no longer applicable is out. Okay. If nothing else, Libby?
Okay. I have worked on preliminary outline number 2 of potential town articles for the 2025 annual town meeting warrant. And what I've been trying to do as we move along with the development of the warrant and these outlines that I give to you is highlight what's changed since the last discussion. So the most immediate thing that has changed is I now have a preliminary list of potential planning articles, and I think the planning director is online to go over those. Those were emailed around today, and they're in your packet. Leslie, you want to just take, yeah, there we go.
All right. Hi, everyone. Leslie Snell, Director of Planning. So we have a series of map changes, bylaw changes that are proposed for the upcoming 2025 annual town meeting. The map changes are all very straightforward. They're mostly cleanup of RC2 articles from prior years, all part of master plan implementation. I won't go through all those. You can see them on the screen. Many of them are just single parcels or a couple of parcels that were left out of prior rezonings for whatever reason. And now the planning board and the property owners are prepared to move forward with the rezoning. We have one that is a change from R40 to ROH. That is a private property on Fair Street. A portion of their property was inadvertently rezoned to R40 along with the Fair Street Park. So this is just a correction to put that back in the ROH zoning district in which it should be properly located. And we have some bylaw changes. There's been a lot of discussion, I think, about the impacts of pickleball courts. So the planning board is considering some prohibitions on those in the residential districts, maybe other districts. You may recall at the last town meeting, there was an inclusionary housing bylaw that was a citizen petition. We've had an internal work group, with planning board members and staff and the petitioner of that article to propose some changes and to streamline that. That may be coming forward as a planning board article, or it may come forward again as a citizen petition. That's yet to be determined. There's a new solar energy bylaw that the energy coordinator has suggested is needed. She's working with planning staff on developing that. We're working on a cottage community that's still very much in development, but think Monomoy Village, except with a year-round and affordability requirement. And then recently at a Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee meeting, there was a presenter that suggested that we perhaps move some of the flood hazard requirements that are in the zoning bylaw to a general bylaw. So that's something that needs some more discussion, but maybe on this upcoming warrant or maybe a future warrant. And then technical amendments. Last town meeting, we moved special permits from the from the planning board to the zoning board. There was one section of the bylaw where we did not make that change. It was overlooked, so that needs to be corrected. There's a structure height change that may need to be made because of some FEMA and building code changes. And then section 139.7, which is recreational marijuana establishments. That's a section that expired in December of 2018, so we need to just remove that from the bylaw. And that's the current list.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. Any questions? None here. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. General bylaws, last week we talked a little bit about noise. And I have since advised, as we discussed, the Wisconsin Civic Association to seek a meeting with the Builders Association to review their proposal. And that is going to also entail gathering together the most recent noise bylaw proposals at town meeting, what the outcome was, so that a complete summary can be provided to the Builders Association, and the most recent proposal by the Civic Association and Civic League can be presented to them. So that is in the works. The other item that I didn't have in here initially was any potential change to the Contract Review Committee membership and/or charge per the recent review of the Contract Review Committee, Council for Human Services, and funding allocation process. So I think there were some recommendations that came out of that review, and we should take a look and see if there are town meeting actions necessary and if the board would want to pursue those.
If I can follow up on that, I think Contract Review and Council for Human Services would like to have a joint meeting to discuss the recommendations and then make recommendations to us with regard to what they think the best path forward is. So, and as a former chair of CHS, I would be happy to sort of represent the select board in that meeting, and
Facilitate.
back.
So that's a joint meeting between those two groups, CRC and CHS? Okay. I will await further input.
I've been talking to the chair, who happens to chair both, and we'll try to work something out.
I still need to do a bunch of work on the home rule petitions. I haven't gotten to that yet. And that is basically the new items. There's still quite a bit in progress and development, but that's the news from since last time we talked about these. And next, the monthly town management report, that was not able to be developed for this meeting.
Okay, thanks, Libby. Okay. Any committee reports from the select board, and then we'll go to the HDC review?
As some of you know, the issue of large events on private property was referred to the Board of Health. And we discussed it last time, is could we do anything? I must say the board was not enthusiastic about the idea. However, and asked me to sort of bring that to the select board. But I'm going to take it back to them. I think we can work our way through that, or at least we can do a little better job of trying to work our way through it instead of just dismissing it offhand. So I'm going to throw it back at them.
Okay, thanks, Malcolm. Anybody else?
Yeah, even if it just helps outline the discussion from the health perspective, we could outline it or have others outline it from the other perspectives. I think, yeah, I'm glad to hear you doing that, Malcolm.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I'll just mention the Island Home had their open house today, and I stopped in, and it was really nice. It was nicely attended. It was very welcoming, and I got to go for a ride, and so did Libby.
As did I.
Oh, you made it too? Good. Well, I just wanted to say it was very nice. I think they'll be doing more.
Okay.
One other comment. There was an article today in the Globe from Boston, and they have a split tax rate. It's 170% goes to commercial, and 100% goes to residences, and they have a lot more commercial than we do. So they've been able to sort of keep their residential rates down, but they're struggling now, and the commercial is struggling, and now they want a state exemption to increase even more onto their commercial, but the commercial don't have anybody renting. They're really struggling. And it got me thinking about how, we went from 175 down to 170. But it got me thinking that maybe there's other ways for us to think about it, to have it as another safety valve, so that when there is a downturn, we have the ability to go back to that if we lowered it. I just think there's different ways to think about it, but I was looking at the predicament they're in and saying, how can we use the good position we're in to make it even better, so that if we end up in a downturn, we have some ability. So it was just I'm planting the seed with everybody here. I shared the article, but I think we'll be talking about that soon. So thank you.
And I wanted to make sure the community knew that today we have put online a form for people who feel that they had economic impact or financial impact from the wind turbine blade crisis, to begin to submit some numbers around the losses they experienced. And that was posted up on the Vineyard Wind crisis page this afternoon. And I encourage everyone to go in, take a look, and begin the process of trying to quantify losses. It's important for us to gather all that information for a number of reasons, and we encourage everyone to share that information to anyone that they feel might have experienced some financial loss or economic harm because of what happened to us in July. Or since July, I should say.
I didn't know that was up, and I'm glad to hear it is. I hope that we lead next week's meeting in telling people to go to it. I think it's that important. And I also hope that our friends in the media, will make this, put the call out for us. They are certainly interested in this issue. I hope that they help and generate some interest so people will actually tell us what happened. I've had some people tell me anecdotally or tell me actually and send it via text when we're in, discussing it, but I'd love to see people put it in writing and get it to us. So, thanks.
And this is not at this time a claim. It is a way for us to aggregate the final impact on the community, which is critical to our negotiations in terms of cost recovery with Vineyard Wind and GE Vernova. So we really encourage people to take the time to do so, and don't worry about verification, or this is an estimate. We're looking for estimates. We're not looking for hard proof or documentation. It's a preliminary estimate of the economic damage. So encourage everyone to participate who feels, again, that they've experienced something.
Yeah, Madam Chair, pretty far from a committee report, but just quickly, early voting is going on downtown, and went down to vote today, and it was terrific. It was efficient, and I just want to thank the town clerk's office for all the work they do in getting us our votes in. Thank you.
Okay, moving on, I'm gonna open the public hearing to consider the appeal of Michael and Mindy Pearlstein of the Historic District Commission approval of a certificate of appropriateness number HDC 2024-8-10993 for a fence at 2 Dairy Lane, map 41, parcel 219. And if we could start with Town Council, Mr. Pucci, just reminding the board of our obligations on one of these appeals. It's always good to remind us of what the parameters are and the process. Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. This is George Pucci from KP Law. I usually attend your appeal hearings on HDC decisions. Erica has been doing these for years and has a very sound procedure that you've been following for years. Typically, you'll hear from the appealing party first, and then you hear from the HDC and the property owner if they want to be heard. And then typically you do accept public comment typically, and then at some point you bring it back to the board for a discussion. I have been asked less and less questions these days because your board is becoming an expert on this appeal procedure. I would just remind you, of course, the HDC's jurisdiction is set out in the Historic District Commission Act. And the basic standard to overturn a decision of the HDC is if you find that their decision was arbitrary and capricious. In other words, no basis on which a reasonable mind could consider that their decision was reasonable. You're not to substitute your judgment for that of the board, but are to exercise jurisdiction to overturn the board if you find that their decision was arbitrary and capricious. And I'll be available here to answer any further questions that you might have on this appeal.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pucci. So I'm going to go to the appellants, and if you'd like to present to the board your...
So they are online.
Yep.
And it looks like they just unmuted.
Okay.
Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, good evening. My name is Michael Perlstein, and I am the owner of 20 Derrymore Road. And our appeal is based upon a few matters. One is we do have an agreement with the neighbor in writing that they were not going to install a 6-foot fence if we agree to install 6-foot privets. We hence have installed those 6-foot privets. They're 120 feet in length. And we have not seen that this permit has been canceled yet. And that is our concern, is that we do have an agreement that we did install those privets in lieu of them not installing the fence. I understand that your jurisdiction is based on, the permit, but as far as a capricious, matter in the way that this decision was made, nobody took in consideration that it's a spite fence, or was going to be a spite fence just behind our backyard, when there's 2 other houses on both sides of us with the same woods. So nobody took that in consideration, how it affects our property. So that's the basis of our appeal. And we're hoping that the property owner, who we've not been able to speak to, will honor their agreement after we spent $15,000 to install, over 100 privets, 6 foot high.
Okay. Thank you. HDC?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Stephen Welch. I serve our community as the Nantucket Historic District Commission Chair. I'm here this evening to present the HDC's position. We were not privy to any of the information on the privet that was just shared, or any particulars of the neighbors. We make our determinations based upon our regulations, guidelines, and past experience. The commission unanimously approved this fence based on long-established guidelines, the character setting of the neighborhood, and the limited visibility of the fence itself. That is basically it. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions from the board?
Oh, and by the way, I'm sorry, Holly, the town's preservation planner, did submit a more prepared letter for the packet, which I'm sure you've all read.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Matt?
I have a question. I'm on page 157, and there's a proposed fence. This is for you or Holly. Is it typical to have a fence on in the middle of the property and not, between just 2 people? Doesn't it, and then not between the other 2 neighbors? Is that a typical? Is that something you approve or see very often?
So what we would be reviewing is whether the location of the fence is typical and within the parameters of the guidelines. And the guidelines indicate that a fence of this type is appropriate in the location that it's been proposed. We don't typically weigh into, well, some members will weigh into why a fence is there. It's not our purview to determine. It is our purview to determine whether the height and the type of the fence is in the most appropriate location and consistent with the guidelines.
Right. So so just as example, if I wanted to put a fence at something natural and block one of my neighbors, and I wanted a 6-foot fence, I could have no fences and then have a 6-foot fence blocking, just say the state police, you know, and then I could have the rest have nothing, and that would be okay from a HDC perspective?
No, I wouldn't suggest that that's okay from an HDC perspective. The HDC doesn't make a determination of what's okay and how you want to use your property with regards to blocking a neighbor or not. We wouldn't weigh into it. What we make a determination on is that a picket fence, if it's in the front of your property, or in the front yard, or along the street, or is it a appropriate style fence that's 6 foot tall along the perimeter in the backyard, or something along those lines. If we were to weigh in on what a neighbor wants to do and why, we would, it would create the basis for an appeal. It wouldn't be legally tenable basis for our decisions.
No, and I'm not saying that you're picking that.
Yeah.
I'm saying, if, say on the front of my house, I just want to put half a picket fence. I just want to do the middle third of my house. I don't, because I just want to have it for 20 feet. You know, is that, would you look at that and say, well, geez, you should have a fence your whole way or not have one at all? Like, you would look at the picture, not my rationale, but the view of it. Do you know what I'm trying to say, Holly?
Right. So
Yeah.
Matt, I'll answer that. A picket fence across half of your front yard wouldn't be appropriate, so we wouldn't allow that. A picket fence, we don't know what's going on in the neighbor's yard or in the applicant's yard. If it's in the backyard, most certainly limited visibility. If this were a fence on Pine Street in the backyard, if it was a short section and it didn't make, with respect to precedent of fences on historic streets, sense for it to be a short section. Now, this certainly isn't short. I think it's some 90-something feet. We would then weigh in on particulars. So it's case by case. This did not rise to a level where we would assert questions on whether this was an appropriate section, lengths, and so on and so forth.
I got you. So you did look at it and it was okay. It was.
Met the guidelines, fit in with the character and setting. There are other properties with fences in the area, much more visible. This has extremely limited visibility, if any, from a very oblique angle down one portion of a driveway, so on and so forth.
Gotcha. All right, thanks. Okay.
Would I be able to weigh in on, would I be able to make any further comment?
Yes, you will. Hang on. Holly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any other information other than what I put in the letter, but if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. You may now respond to what the HDC said.
Thank you. Well, first of all, this proposed fence is visible from the street. I mean, it's very clear if they put a 6-foot fence up, it is visible from both sides of the street. Besides that, the reason why the applicant wanted to put the fence up is because we had complained that they weren't maintaining that wooded area, and they figured it was less expensive to put a fence up than to maintain that area. It wasn't a wetlands area, and we did provide the zone, the buffer zone that was highlighted within that 100-foot zone. I don't know if the applicant has to prove that they're not in that zone, but I did provide it from the commission, the Conservation Commission, who said that the applicant would need to hire somebody to prove that it's not within that 100-foot zone. But as I said, we do have it in writing that if we install the privets, they would not put the fence up, and that's our understanding. So I know that's not in your jurisdiction. That could be a different court as far as other, civil court, or, a different matter as litigation, but we do have an agreement. It's just odd that I haven't seen that the permit has been canceled by the applicant, and that's what concerns us. Because it is a spite fence. That's the whole purpose. It's a spite fence.
Erica, did you?
I just wanted to know that any private agreement between neighbors is a civil matter.
Correct.
And nothing to do with appealing to the appealing an HDC application to you.
And, okay, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak at this time? Okay. Seeing none, the pleasure of the board. Right,
Motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the public hearing is now closed. Any questions, or, I have a question for town council, but does anyone else have any?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Going back to this wetlands issue, I know that's not the HDC, but should this be referred to the Conservation Commission? Is this a wetlands violation or not?
So that's my question for town council. My understanding is our purview is to determine whether the HDC's decision was arbitrary and capricious, where the homeowner's ability to erect the fence is subject to any private agreements or the necessary Conservation Commission permits is not what we're here to do tonight, as I understand it. And I would just like town council to confirm that fact or that statement.
Yes, hi again, Brooke. Yes, absolutely. And, you know, this is a fairly common thing where there can be multiple approvals required for a certain structure. And I'm not saying that that's the case here, but the fact that the HDC might have approved it under their jurisdiction doesn't mean that it necessarily complies with zoning or wetlands, either the local wetlands bylaw or the state Wetlands Protection Act. But that would be an issue for, you know, to take up with the board with that jurisdiction or with the conservation agent. And it would not be appropriate for you to be, you know, passing on that when determining whether or not you feel that the decision of the HDC approving the fence was arbitrary and capricious.
Okay, thank you, George. Any other questions or comments from the board or the pleasure?
I'll let comment. I don't think the HDC, I'd like to uphold the HDC. I don't think this was even really in there. I'm not sure it should have been brought to the HDC. It feels like this is a civil matter and/or a COMCOM matter, and they should be going there.
Madam Chair, I agree. I don't think it's arbitrary. I think well, he can do what he wants, but I think he should approach the COMCOM and hire an attorney.
Okay. So if that's the consensus of the board, I believe the motion would be to deny the appeal.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay. We're at the end of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, and a quick, Steve, just so you know, I was mixing up the two properties. The questions I was asking you, I had flip-flopped the properties in my head, so that if it explains why I was asking that. Thanks.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. Oh, yeah. It was fascinating.